The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of Jefferson Elementary School's gymnasium, casting long shadows across the polished wooden floor. Outside, the autumn leaves were just beginning to turn golden, and the crisp October air carried the promise of change. Inside, chaos reigned in the most delightful way possible. "Mommy, when is the police dog coming?" A boy in a striped shirt called out for the fifth time in 10 minutes. "Soon, sweetie," his mother replied, checking her watch with a patient smile. 200 children from various preschools and kindergartens across Columbus, Ohio, sat cross-legged on the gymnasium floor, their energy barely contained. Parents and teachers lined the walls, smartphones ready to capture what promised to be a memorable morning. The monthly community safety demonstration was always popular, but today's featured guest, a real K-9 police officer, had generated unprecedented excitement. Sarah Rodriguez stood near the back, her 3-year-old daughter Emma perched on her hip. Unlike the other children who wiggled and whispered and could barely sit still, Emma was unusually quiet. Her small fingers clutched her worn stuffed rabbit, Mr. Hoppy, squeezing it tighter than normal. Sarah noticed her daughter's unusual stillness, but attributed it to the overwhelming crowd. Emma wasn't typically shy, but this was her first big community event. "You okay, baby?" Sarah whispered, smoothing Emma's dark curls. Emma nodded but didn't respond, her enormous brown eyes scanning the gymnasium entrance with an intensity that seemed odd for such a young child. At precisely 10:00 a.m., the double doors swung open. A hush fell over the crowd, or at least as much of a hush as 200 excited children could manage. Officer Marcus Chen strode into the gymnasium with the confident bearing of someone who'd done this 100 times before. He was in his mid-30s, wearing his crisp police uniform with pride, his badge gleaming under the fluorescent lights. But it wasn't Officer Chen who captured every eye in the room. Beside him, moving with fluid grace and perfect discipline, was Duke, a magnificent German shepherd whose dark sable coat shimmered with health and vitality. The dog's ears stood at perfect attention, his intelligent amber eyes surveying the room with professional assessment. He walked in precise step with his handler, the picture of controlled power and loyalty. The gymnasium erupted, children squealed with delight, parents whispered appreciatively, phones appeared like magic, capturing photos and videos. "Look at him, he's so big, can we pet him?" The questions tumbled over each other in an excited cascade. Sarah felt Emma's entire body go rigid against her chest. The little girl's breathing became shallow, rapid. "Emma," Sarah whispered, concerned now. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" Emma didn't answer. She was staring at the dog with an expression Sarah had never seen on her daughter's face before, a mixture of recognition, shock, and something that looked almost like grief. Officer Chen raised his hand and the room gradually quieted. Duke sat immediately at his side, the perfect picture of obedience. "Good morning, everyone. I'm Officer Marcus Chen, and this is my partner, Duke. We're here today to teach you about K-9 officers and how police dogs help keep our community safe." The children listened, enthralled, as Officer Chen explained how he and Duke had been partners for nearly 2 years. He described how Duke had been specially trained to track missing persons, detect dangerous substances, and assist in search and rescue operations. With each sentence, the children's admiration grew. "Duke here has helped find 3 missing children," Officer Chen continued, his voice filled with pride as he scratched behind his partner's ears. "He's also helped us catch bad guys and keep people safe. He's not just my partner, he's a hero." The crowd clapped enthusiastically. Duke's tail wagged once briefly, before returning to his professional stillness. Sarah tried to set Emma down so she could see better, but the little girl clung to her mother with surprising strength. "No, Mommy," she whispered, her voice trembling. "No, no, no." "Emma, what's wrong?" Sarah's concern deepened. Was her daughter afraid of the dog? That didn't make sense. Emma had always loved animals, constantly begging for a puppy of their own. Officer Chen began demonstrating Duke's skills. At his command, Duke lay down, rolled over, and jumped over a small barrier. The children clapped and cheered with each trick. Then Chen threw a training dummy across the gymnasium. Duke, search. The German shepherd sprang into action, racing across the floor with breathtaking speed and precision. He located the dummy in seconds, returning it to Officer Chen's hand with gentle jaws. The crowd went wild. But Emma's reaction was completely different. Tears began streaming down her small cheeks, silent and steady. Her whole body shook. "Baby, what is it?" Sarah was genuinely frightened now. "Are you scared of the dog? We can leave if—" "No," Emma's voice came out strangled, choked. "No, Mommy, I need." Before Sarah could stop her, Emma pushed away from her mother's arms. The little girl slid to the ground, her legs unsteady. Sarah reached for her, but Emma was already moving, walking forward through the crowd of seated children. "Emma," Sarah called out, embarrassed and worried, trying to follow without causing a scene. Officer Chen was in the middle of explaining how Duke's nose could detect scents humans couldn't even imagine when he noticed the commotion. A small girl in a pink dress was standing now, walking toward him with determined, jerky steps, as if her legs weren't quite following her brain's commands. The other children turned to look. Parents craned their necks. The room's energy shifted from excitement to confusion. Emma stopped about 15 feet away from Officer Chen and Duke. Her small chest heaved with emotion. Tears continued to flow freely down her face, dripping onto her pink dress. Mr. Hoppy dangled forgotten from her left hand. Then slowly, deliberately, Emma raised her right arm. Her small finger pointed directly at Duke, trembling but unwavering. The gymnasium fell completely silent. Officer Chen smiled kindly, assuming the little girl wanted to ask a question. "Yes, sweetheart. Do you want to?" "That's my dog." The words were soft, barely above a whisper, but in the shocked silence of the gymnasium, they rang out like a gunshot. Emma's voice grew stronger, more insistent, rising with desperate conviction. "That's my dog." The silence that followed Emma's declaration was deafening. 200 people seemed to hold their breath simultaneously, creating a vacuum of sound so complete that the distant hum of the heating system became audible. Emma's words hung in the air like a physical presence, impossible and yet undeniable. "That's my dog." Sarah's face flushed crimson, the heat spreading from her cheeks down her neck. Mortification washed over her in waves as every eye in the gymnasium turned to stare. She rushed forward, her shoes squeaking against the polished floor, each step echoing like a drumbeat in the terrible silence. "Emma, honey, no," Sarah said, her voice strained with embarrassment as she reached for her daughter's hand. "I'm so sorry," she called out to Officer Chen, forcing an apologetic smile. "She's only 3, she doesn't understand." "No," Emma jerked away from her mother's grasp with surprising force, nearly stumbling in her desperation to avoid being pulled back. The little girl's voice cracked with emotion, rising to a pitch that made several parents wince. "That is my dog. Mommy, that's my dog." Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. A few parents exchanged knowing glances, clearly just a confused toddler, they seemed to say. Children mix things up all the time. Maybe she'd seen a similar dog on television. Maybe she was just excited and overwhelmed. But Sarah wasn't laughing. She knew her daughter. Emma was bright, precocious even, but she wasn't prone to dramatic outbursts or confusion. The raw emotion in her little girl's voice sent chills down Sarah's spine. This wasn't a mistake. Emma genuinely believed what she was saying. "Sweetie, we don't have a dog," Sarah said more firmly, kneeling beside Emma and gripping her shoulders gently. "Remember, we talked about maybe getting a puppy someday, but we don't have one now." Emma's face crumpled. Fat tears rolled down her cheeks faster now, her breath coming in hitching sobs. But that's... She couldn't seem to form complete sentences through her crying. Her small body shook with the force of her distress. Officer Chen remained remarkably calm, though his expression had shifted from amused tolerance to genuine puzzlement. He'd done dozens of these demonstrations. Children often got excited, sometimes overwhelmed, but this was different. This little girl wasn't just excited, she was devastated. "Hey, it's okay," he said gently, taking a few steps closer while keeping Duke at a steady heel position. "Sometimes big dogs can seem familiar, even if we haven't met them before. Duke here is very friendly, and after the demonstration, if your mom says it's okay, you can pet him. Would you like that?" His kind words seemed to have the opposite of their intended effect. Emma's crying intensified, her sobs now coming in great gulping waves that shook her entire frame. "No, no, no," she wailed, her voice breaking. "You don't understand. That's my dog, I know him." "Emma, please," Sarah whispered urgently, acutely aware of the hundreds of eyes watching this scene unfold. Several parents had their phones out now, probably recording. This would be all over the local parent Facebook groups by lunchtime. "You're making a scene. Let's go outside and talk about this, okay?" But Emma planted her feet, her tiny body rigid with determination. Through her tears, she looked directly at Officer Chen, and what came out of her mouth next made the officer's confident smile freeze on his face. "His name is Duke," Emma said clearly, her voice cutting through her sobs with eerie certainty. The gymnasium erupted in whispers. Several people gasped audibly. Officer Chen's hand tightened on the leash. His eyes widened, and for the first time since entering the gymnasium, he looked genuinely rattled. What did you say?" "His name is Duke," Emma repeated, louder now, anger mixing with her grief. "Why won't anyone listen to me? That's Duke." Sarah felt her heart stutter in her chest. She looked up at Officer Chen, saw the shock on his face, and her stomach dropped. "Wait," she said slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. You didn't tell anyone the dog's name yet, did you?" Officer Chen shook his head mutely. He'd been planning to introduce Duke by name after the demonstration of commands, as he always did. It was part of his standard routine. There was no way this child could know. "Duke likes tennis balls," Emma continued, her words tumbling out faster now as if a dam had broken. "The red ones, not the green ones. Green ones taste bad, he says, and he doesn't like thunderstorms. They're too loud and they make him scared, so he hides under the bed." The officer's face had gone pale. His professional composure cracked, revealing genuine shock underneath. How could you possibly know?" "And he has a special spot," Emma interrupted, pointing at Duke's chest. "Right here on his belly, a white spot shaped like a heart. Mommy said it made him special, that it meant he had extra love inside." The crowd was no longer whispering. People were standing now, craning to see, their excitement at a simple K9 demonstration transforming into something else entirely, witnessing something inexplicable, impossible. Officer Chen's hands trembled slightly as he looked down at Duke. The German Shepherd wore a standard K9 vest, dark and professional, covering his chest and belly completely. The white marking Emma described wasn't visible, couldn't be visible. Unless she'd seen it before. Sarah's mind was reeling. Her daughter's words echoed in her head. "His name is Duke, doesn't like thunderstorms, hides under the bed, white spots shaped like a heart." No, it couldn't be. It was impossible. But even as she tried to reject the thought, memories came flooding back. 15 months ago. Their backyard, the frantic search, the empty collar, the weeks of hopping, praying, searching every shelter, posting flyers on every corner. "Their Duke, their lost Duke." "Officer," Sarah said, her voice shaking so badly she could barely get the words out. Could you please lift his vest, just for a moment?" The crowd seemed to lean forward collectively, sensing something momentous about to happen. Officer Chen hesitated, his training warring with his confusion. This was highly irregular, but something in Sarah's expression, Hope and terror mixed in equal measure made him reach down with unsteady hands. He lifted the edge of Duke's dark vest, revealing the dog's belly. And there it was. A white marking, roughly the size of a quarter, against the German Shepherd's tan undercoat. Shaped exactly like a heart. The gymnasium exploded with gasps and exclamations. Several people screamed. Sarah's legs gave out, and she sank to the floor, one hand pressed against her mouth. Emma broke free and ran forward, her little legs pumping. "Duke!" she cried out, her voice filled with pure, unrestrained joy. And then something happened that made Officer Marcus Chen's blood run cold. Duke, his perfectly trained, absolutely disciplined K-9 partner who had never, in 2 years of service, broken a command, suddenly lurched forward with such force that the leash was nearly ripped from Chen's hands. The leash burned through Officer Chen's fingers as Duke pulled with a force the officer had never experienced from his partner. In 2 years of working together, through dangerous situations, chaotic crime scenes, and countless distractions, Duke had never once broken his disciplined composure. The German Shepherd was the epitome of professional control, the star of the K-9 unit, a dog that other handlers envied for his unwavering focus. Until this moment. "Duke, heel, heel," Officer Chen commanded, his voice sharp with authority. He planted his feet, using all his strength to hold the leash, his arms straining against the dog's desperate pulling. But Duke wasn't listening. For the first time in their partnership, the dog completely ignored a direct command. His powerful muscles bunched and released as he strained toward Emma, his entire body vibrating with an emotion Chen had never witnessed in him before. A sound emerged from Duke's throat, not a bark, not a growl, but a whine so high-pitched and desperate it sounded almost human. It was the sound of a heart breaking and healing simultaneously. "Duke," Chen tried again, his professional mask slipping to reveal genuine panic. If Duke lost control during a demonstration, it could ruin everything: his career, the K-9 program's reputation, Duke's position on the force. "Duke, stop, sit." The German Shepherd didn't sit. Instead, he dug his claws into the polished gymnasium floor, pulling harder, his amber eyes locked on the small girl running toward him. His tail, normally held in a neutral professional position, was wagging so violently it was almost a blur, his entire rear end swinging back and forth with the force of it. Emma was crying and laughing at the same time, her arms outstretched, her little legs carrying her as fast as they could across the gymnasium floor. "Duke, Duke, Duke," she chanted between sobs, her voice echoing off the high ceiling. The crowd was on its feet now. Parents grabbed their own children, pulling them back to create a clear path. Some people were crying. Others had their hands over their mouths in shock. Smartphones recorded every second of the impossible scene unfolding before them. Sarah tried to stand, to run after her daughter, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. She remained on her knees, tears streaming down her face, watching something she'd convinced herself she would never see again. Officer Chen made a split-second decision. Every instinct screamed that this was wrong, that he was losing control of the situation, that he should maintain discipline. But another part of him, the part that had spent 2 years sleeping in the same room as Duke, sharing meals, trusting this dog with his life, recognized something profound happening. He let go of the leash. Duke exploded forward like a shot from a cannon. His powerful legs propelled him across the gymnasium in mere seconds, his claws scrabbling for purchase on the slick floor. He covered the distance to Emma so fast that several parents gasped in fear, certain the massive dog was about to bowl over the tiny child. But Duke's control, even in his desperate state, was absolute when it came to Emma's safety. 3 feet away, he adjusted his speed, his momentum, his trajectory. He reached the little girl and dropped to his belly in a move so smooth it looked choreographed, sliding the last few inches on the polished floor like a baseball player stealing home. Emma collapsed onto him, her small body draping across his broad back, her arms wrapping as far around his neck as her little arms could reach. "Duke, Duke, Duke," she sobbed into his fur, her face buried against his shoulder. "I missed you so much. I missed you so much." And Duke, the trained police dog, the professional K-9 officer, the disciplined guardian, transformed before everyone's eyes into nothing more than a puppy reunited with his child. He twisted his head around, his long pink tongue emerging to frantically lick every inch of Emma's face he could reach. He whined and whimpered, sounds no one in that gymnasium had ever heard from a police dog. His tail hadn't stopped wagging. If anything, it moved faster now, thumping against the floor with rhythmic beats that echoed through the silent space. Emma giggled through her tears as Duke's tongue found her ear, her neck, her cheek. "You remember me," she laughed, her voice filled with pure, unbridled joy. "You remember me, Duke. I knew you would. I told Mommy you would." The little girl pressed her forehead against Duke's, staring into his amber eyes from inches away. "Where did you go?" she whispered, her voice cracking. "I looked everywhere for you. Everywhere, I thought. I thought you didn't want to be my friend anymore." Duke's response was to intensify his affection, his whole body wriggling with happiness despite Emma's weight on top of him. He managed to roll slightly, exposing his belly, the ultimate sign of trust and submission in a dog, revealing that distinctive heart-shaped white marking that had started all of this. Emma immediately placed her small hand over it, just as she apparently had done hundreds of times before. "Your special spot," she said softly, her tears dripping onto Duke's fur. "It's still here. Your heart is still here." The gymnasium had become a cathedral of silence, 200 people witnessing something sacred and inexplicable. Parents who had been strangers minutes ago were holding hands, crying together. Teachers dabbed at their eyes with tissues. Even the children, who moments before had been wiggling and chattering, sat in stunned, reverent quiet. Officer Chen stood frozen in place, his empty hand still raised as if holding a leash that was no longer there. He watched his partner, his brave, stoic, professional partner, become completely undone by a 3-year-old girl. The dog he thought he knew completely was revealing a past, a history, a whole life that Chen had never suspected existed. Sarah finally found the strength to stand. On shaking legs, she walked toward her daughter and the dog that had once been theirs. She moved slowly, as if afraid that moving too quickly would shatter whatever magic was happening and reveal it all to be a cruel dream. Emma looked up as her mother approached, her face shining with tears and joy. "Mommy," he came back. Duke came back. But before Sarah could respond, Duke's attention shifted. His head turned toward her, and for a moment, Chen saw the dog's ears flatten against his head, uncertainty, perhaps even guilt. Then Duke's tail resumed its frantic wagging, and he lurched to his feet despite Emma clinging to him, nearly knocking the little girl over in his eagerness. He rushed to Sarah, circling her legs, whining, his entire body expressing an apology, a plea for forgiveness, a desperate need for recognition. And Sarah, practical, logical Sarah, who had spent 15 months telling herself that her family's Duke was gone forever, that they needed to move on, that dwelling on the loss wasn't healthy, dropped to her knees and wrapped her arms around the German shepherd's neck. "Oh my God," she sobbed into his fur, her body shaking. "Oh my God, it's really you. It's really you." Duke pressed his head against her chest, the exact spot he used to rest it when she'd been sad, when she'd needed comfort. Some things, it seemed, a dog never forgot. Officer Marcus Chen felt his world tilting on its axis as a single, terrible question formed in his mind. If this was their dog, what did that mean for? Marcus Chen stood in the middle of the gymnasium, feeling as though the floor had disappeared beneath his feet. Around him, 200 people watched in stunned silence as his K-9 partner, the dog he'd trained with, worked with, trusted with his life for 2 years, lavished affection on complete strangers as if they were his entire world. Except they weren't strangers to Duke. That much was painfully, impossibly clear. Chen's radio crackled on his belt. Unit 12, what's your status? You were supposed to wrap up 15 minutes ago. The dispatcher's voice sounded tinny and distant, coming from a normal world where impossible things didn't happen. He couldn't respond, couldn't move, could barely breathe. Emma had climbed onto Duke's back like she'd done it 1,000 times before, her little legs dangling on either side of the German shepherd. Duke stood perfectly still for her, his tail still wagging, occasionally turning his head to lick her knee. The picture of patience and gentleness. "He used to give me rides," Emma announced to the silent gymnasium, her voice carrying with the clarity only children possess. "Every morning before breakfast, right, Duke, round and round the living room." Sarah was sitting on the floor now, her hand pressed against her mouth, nodding through her tears. "Every single morning," she confirmed in a whisper. "We called it the Duke Express." Officer Chen finally found his voice, though it came out rougher than he intended. "Ma'am, I need to understand what's happening here." He pulled out his phone with trembling hands. "You said you lost a dog named Duke." 15 months ago, Sarah said, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "He disappeared from our backyard in Riverside. We searched for weeks, months really, we never found him." Her voice broke on the last word. Riverside, Chen's mind raced. "That's 40 miles from where Duke was found." "Where who was found?" Sarah's head snapped up, her eyes sharp despite the tears. "Your Duke, where exactly did you get him?" Before Chen could answer, Emma piped up again, still perched on Duke's back. "He likes his ears rubbed in circles, not straight. Straight tickles and makes him sneeze." As if to demonstrate, she rubbed Duke's left ear in a circular motion. The dog's eyes half closed in pleasure, and he made a soft groaning sound of contentment. Chen felt his chest tighten. Duke did hate having his ears rubbed in straight lines. How many times had Chen absent-mindedly scratched Duke's ears only to have the dog sneeze and pull away? He'd learned to rub in circles, though he'd never understood why Duke preferred it that way. Until now. "And he doesn't like car rides," Emma continued, her young voice taking on a matter-of-fact tone as if she were reciting the alphabet. "They make his tummy upset, but if you give him ginger cookies before the car, he feels better." Officer Chen's phone slipped from his fingers, clattering on the gymnasium floor. He'd struggled with Duke's car sickness for months when they'd first partnered together. The veterinarian had finally suggested ginger supplements, which worked. But how could this child know that? "Emma, baby," Sarah said gently, standing up and moving closer to her daughter. "What else do you remember about Duke?" The little girl's face scrunched up in concentration, one tiny hand still absently stroking Duke's head. "He has bad dreams sometimes, about the bad place with the mean man. He whimpers and his legs move like he's running. When that happens, you have to wake him up gentle and tell him he's safe now." The gymnasium seemed to tilt. Chen had to grip the nearby bleacher to steady himself. Duke did have nightmares, about once a month, sometimes more. The dog would whimper and thrash in his sleep, his legs moving in running motions. Chen always woke him gently, speaking in soothing tones until Duke's breathing returned to normal. But Emma had just said something that made Chen's blood run cold. "The bad place with the mean man." "Emma," Chen said, his voice barely above a whisper as he approached carefully. "What bad place?" The little girl's expression changed, clouds passing over her sunny face. "The place where Duke went after he left our yard. There was a mean man who didn't give him food. Duke was so hungry and scared." She hugged the dog's neck tighter. "But then he runned away. He runned and runned until his paws hurt." Sarah's face had gone pale. "Emma, how do you know about a mean man? We never told you." "Duke told me," Emma said simply, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. An uncomfortable silence fell over the gymnasium. Several parents shifted uneasily. A few whispered to each other. Chen could imagine what they were thinking. The girl was making things up, letting her imagination run wild, attributing her own fears and fantasies to the dog. But Chen wasn't so sure. He'd always wondered about the scarring on Duke's ribs when he'd first gotten him from the rescue organization. Old injuries, the vet had said, possibly from abuse or neglect. Duke had been underweight, skittish around loud men, terrified of certain sounds. Duke had a past, a dark one, and this little girl somehow knew about it. "Officer Chen," Sarah said, her voice steady now despite the tears still streaming down her face. "I think we need to talk, privately." Chen nodded mutely. Around them, the crowd began to stir, whispers building into conversations. The principal of Jefferson Elementary pushed through the crowd, her face a mixture of concern and confusion. "Officer, should we continue with the demonstration or—" "No," Chen said firmly. "No, we're done here." He looked at Sarah. "There's an office we can use. We need to figure out what's going on." But Emma wasn't ready to move. She slid off Duke's back and turned to face Officer Chen with an expression far too serious for a 3-year-old. "Are you the one who saved him?" she asked quietly. Chen blinked, caught off guard. I didn't save him. The rescue organization found him. I adopted him for the K-9 program." "But you were nice to him," Emma pressed. "You gave him food and a warm bed and told him he was a good boy." "Yes," Chen managed to say past the lump in his throat. "Yes, I did, I do." Emma studied him for a long moment, her young face grave. Then she walked over and took his hand in her tiny one. "Thank you for taking care of my dog when I couldn't." And just like that, Officer Marcus Chen's heart shattered into a million pieces. The principal's office felt impossibly small with 4 people, and 1 German shepherd crowded inside. Emma refused to let go of Duke, her small arms wrapped around his neck like a lifeline. The dog sat pressed against her side, his amber eyes moving between Sarah and Officer Chen as if trying to understand the tension crackling in the air. Sarah sat in one of the visitors' chairs, her hands trembling as she pulled out her phone. Officer Chen stood by the window, his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. He wanted answers. No, he needed them. His entire world had been upended in the span of 20 minutes. "His full name was Duke Rodriguez," Sarah began, her voice barely above a whisper. She swiped through her phone, pulling up photos that were clearly years old. "We got him as a puppy when I was pregnant with Emma. My husband Miguel and I wanted a dog that could grow up with our baby, be her protector." She turned the phone toward Officer Chen. The screen showed a puppy, unmistakably a German shepherd with oversized paws and floppy ears. And there, just visible on his little belly, was the heart-shaped white marking. Chen's stomach lurched. It was Duke. Younger, smaller, but undeniably Duke. "He was perfect," Sarah continued, swiping to the next photo. This one showed a slightly older Duke lying on a nursery floor, a tiny baby in a pink onesie using his side as a pillow. "From the moment we brought Emma home from the hospital, he was obsessed with her, followed her everywhere, slept under her crib every single night. When she cried, he'd come find us, barking until we came to check on her." More photos. Duke and toddler Emma in a pile of autumn leaves. Duke wearing a silly birthday hat. Duke gently taking a treat from Emma's chubby baby fingers. Each image was a window into a life that Officer Chen had never known existed, Duke's first life. His real family. "What happened?" Chen asked quietly, though part of him didn't want to know the answer. Sarah's face crumpled and she took a shuddering breath. "May 17th, 15 months ago, I'll never forget that date. Miguel had just left for work. I put Emma down for her afternoon nap and let Duke out into the backyard like I did every day. Our yard was completely fenced, 6 feet high chain link with a locked gate. He'd never gotten out before, not once in 3 years." She paused, wiping her eyes with a tissue from the principal's desk. Emma, sensing her mother's distress, looked up from where she was whispering secrets into Duke's ear. "I was only inside for 20 minutes, Sarah continued, her voice cracking. "Maybe 30. I was folding laundry and I heard Emma wake up on the monitor when I went to get her and looked out the back window. She stopped, her breath hitching. The gate was open. Duke was gone. Officer Chen felt his chest tighten. The gate was open. Did someone? We don't know, Sarah interrupted, her voice rising with old anguish and frustration. The lock wasn't broken, it was just open, like someone had unlocked it from the inside. But that's impossible because no one else was home. To this day, we have no idea how it happened. She swiped frantically through more photos, these ones clearly screenshots of missing dog posters. Duke's face stared out from dozens of them, alongside Sarah's phone number and a desperate plea. Beloved family pet. Reward for safe return. We searched everywhere, Sarah said, her words tumbling out faster now, as if a dam had broken. We drove through every neighborhood within a 50-mile radius. We checked every shelter twice a day, morning and evening. We posted 500 flyers. We created Facebook groups, Twitter accounts. We contacted every veterinary office, every rescue organization, every dog groomer in 3 counties. Officer Chen could hear the desperation in her voice, could imagine the sleepless nights, the frantic phone calls, the growing dread as hours turned into days, days into weeks. Miguel took time off work to search, Sarah continued. I barely slept. Emma, her voice broke completely. Emma was only 21 months old, but she knew something was wrong. She would toddle to the back door a dozen times a day, calling for Duke. She'd go to his food bowl and cry because it was empty. At night, she couldn't sleep without him under her crib. Emma's little voice interrupted softly. I missed him so much, Mommy. Sarah pulled her daughter close with one arm, still clutching her phone with the other. For 2 months, she cried herself to sleep every single night. She'd wake up screaming, having nightmares. Our pediatrician said she was traumatized by the loss. We tried everything, therapy, toys, comfort items, routines. Nothing worked. She just wanted Duke. Officer Chen felt like he couldn't breathe. He looked at Duke, who was watching Sarah with an expression that seemed almost guilty, regretful. Could a dog really remember? Could a dog really understand what he'd put this family through? After 3 months of searching, everyone told us to give up, Sarah said bitterly. The police said he was probably dead. The shelters said most lost dogs don't make it past 2 weeks on their own. Our friends said we needed to move on for Emma's sake, get her a new puppy. But we couldn't, she whispered fiercely. We kept his collar, his toys, his food bowls. We kept searching, kept hopping, even though everyone said we were torturing ourselves. Miguel wanted to get Emma a new dog, thought it would help her heal, but I refused. I told myself that Duke was still out there somewhere, that he'd find his way home. She looked up at Officer Chen, her eyes blazing through the tears. Do you know what we told Emma when she kept asking where Duke was? We told her he went to live on a farm. We told her he was happy and safe and chasing rabbits. We lied to our baby girl because the truth, that we didn't know if he was alive or dead, starving or hurt, was too terrible to say. Emma's voice was small and sad. But he didn't go to a farm, he went to the bad place. Sarah pulled Emma onto her lap, holding her tightly. After about 6 months, we finally started to accept that he wasn't coming back. Emma had stopped asking about him every day. We'd taken down most of the posters. We were starting to let go. She looked at Duke, fresh tears streaming down her face. And the whole time he was alive. He was here in Columbus, 40 miles away, and we had no idea. We drove past this city 100 times going to shelters in other counties. We might have driven right past him and never known. Officer Chen's mind was reeling. He pulled out his own phone with shaking hands and opened his photos. He scrolled back 2 years to the day he'd first met Duke at the Riverside County Rescue Organization. There was Duke, thin, scared, his ribs showing, his coat dull and matted. The intake form had listed him as a stray found wandering Highway 23, no collar, no microchip, no identification. Estimated age, 3 years. Temperament, nervous but gentle. History, unknown. The rescue organization found him 70 miles from Riverside, Chen said slowly. He'd been wandering for who knows how long. When I adopted him, they said he'd been at the shelter for 2 months, and before that, he'd been found by highway patrol, nearly hit by a semi-truck. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. 2 months at the shelter. That would have been July. We were checking the Riverside shelters, but he was in Franklin County. We didn't even think to look that far away. The cruel mathematics of near misses hung in the air between them. A different county, a different set of shelters, 40 miles that might as well have been 1,000. I need to ask you something, Officer Chen said quietly. Did you microchip him? Sarah nodded. Yes. The day we brought him home as a puppy, it was one of the first things we did. Chen felt his blood run cold. Duke doesn't have a microchip. I had him scanned when I adopted him. There was nothing. The word hung in the air like a guillotine blade waiting to fall. Microchip. Sarah's face went from grief-stricken to alarmed in an instant. That's impossible, she said firmly, sitting up straighter. I have the paperwork. I have the microchip registration number. I never canceled it. I kept paying the annual fee even after he disappeared, just in case someone found him and scanned him. The chip is there. It has to be. Officer Chen shook his head slowly. Ma'am, I'm telling you, when the rescue organization processed Duke, they scanned him multiple times. No chip. When I adopted him for the K-9 program, our veterinarian did a full medical exam including a chip scan. Nothing. I had him scanned again 6 months ago during his annual checkup. Still nothing. Sarah was already dialing a number on her phone, her fingers moving frantically across the screen. I'm calling our veterinarian, Dr. Patricia Hollies at Riverside Animal Hospital. She did the microchipping herself when Duke was 8 weeks old. While they waited for the call to connect, Emma spoke up from her position on the floor, her head resting on Duke's back. The mean man hurt Duke's shoulder, she said quietly. Right here. She pointed to a spot on Duke's left shoulder blade. Officer Chen crouched down, his professional instincts overriding his emotional turmoil. Emma, can you show me exactly where? The little girl placed her small hand on Duke's left shoulder, just below the shoulder blade. Here. It made a little bump that hurt when you touched it. Duke didn't like it. Chen's breath caught in his throat. He gently moved his fingers over the area Emma had indicated, feeling through Duke's thick coat. There. He'd felt it before but never thought much about it. A small area of scar tissue, slightly raised, right where a microchip would typically be implanted. Dr. Hollies, Sarah's voice cut through his thoughts. Yes, it's Sarah Rodriguez. I need to ask you about Duke's microchip. Yes, our Duke. The one who went missing. I need the exact location where you implanted it. Left shoulder subcutaneous just below the shoulder blade. Number 982,123,456,789. You're certain? Thank you. Yes, I'll explain later. She hung up and looked at Officer Chen with eyes that burned with a terrible understanding. Left shoulder blade, exactly where Emma just pointed. Officer Chen stood slowly, his mind racing through implications he didn't want to face. I need to take Duke to a veterinarian. Right now. Can you come with us? 20 minutes later, they were in an examination room at Columbus Emergency Veterinary Clinic. Dr. Rachel Martinez, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and steady hands, ran a specialized scanner over every inch of Duke's body, while the German Shepherd stood patiently on the examination table. Nothing, Dr. Martinez confirmed, setting down the scanner. No active microchip detected anywhere in his body. But there's scarring, Officer Chen said, guiding her hand to Duke's left shoulder. Right here. Can you tell us what might have caused that? Dr. Martinez palpated the area carefully, her experienced fingers mapping the tissue beneath Duke's skin. Her expression grew grave. This is scar tissue consistent with a foreign object being removed. See this pattern? She traced a small line with her finger. This suggests an incision was made crude, not surgical. Someone cut into the tissue and extracted something. Sarah made a small, wounded sound. Her hand found Emma's and squeezed tight. "You're saying someone deliberately removed his microchip?" Officer Chen asked, though he already knew the answer. "I'd stake my license on it," Dr. Martinez said grimly. "This wasn't migration, which happens sometimes with chips. This wasn't a chip that failed or stopped working. This was manual removal. Whoever did it wasn't a professional. They didn't care about proper wound care or pain management. They just wanted that chip out." The implications settled over the room like a suffocating blanket. Someone had taken Duke. Someone had held him captive long enough to remove his identification. Someone had deliberately erased his past so he couldn't be traced back to his family. "Emma said there was a mean man," Sarah whispered, her voice shaking with rage and horror. "A bad place where Duke was hungry and scared." Dr. Martinez looked at Emma with new respect. "Young lady, do you remember anything else about the bad place?" Emma's lower lip trembled, but she nodded. "It was dark and smelly. There were other dogs there too, but they were in cages. Duke was in a cage too, but his was too small. He couldn't stand up all the way." Tears began rolling down her cheeks. "And there was a really loud noise that hurt his ears, like beep 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 all the time." Sarah pulled Emma close, but Officer Chen was focused on the details. "Emma, did Duke ever see outside the bad place? Can you remember any colors or shapes?" The little girl scrunched her face in concentration. "There were big metal things outside, round things stacked up, and everything smelled like old pennies." "Barrels," Officer Chen said, his detective instincts engaging. "She's describing barrels or drums, and the smell of metal or rust." He pulled out his phone and started typing notes. The beeping sound could be industrial equipment, maybe a backup alarm on a truck or machinery. Dr. Martinez had moved to her computer. "I'm required by law to report suspected animal abuse and theft. I need to file a formal report with Animal Control and the police department." "I'll handle the police report," Officer Chen said automatically. "This is potentially connected to a larger case. If someone was stealing dogs, removing their chips and selling them." He didn't finish the sentence, but everyone understood. Duke might not have been the only victim. Sarah's voice was ice. How long was he in that place?" Dr. Martinez examined Duke more thoroughly, checking his teeth, his paws, his overall condition. "Based on the healing of the scar tissue and Officer Chen's timeline of when he was found, I'd estimate the chip was removed within a week or two of his disappearance. The condition he was in when found, malnourished, dehydrated, traumatized, suggests he was held captive for perhaps 2 to 4 weeks before he escaped or was released." "He runned away," Emma said firmly. "He was brave and he runned very far until his paws hurt and he was so tired, but he kept trying to come home to me." Duke, who had been standing quietly throughout the examination, suddenly turned and nuzzled Emma's face, licking away her tears. The gesture was so tender, so deliberate, that everyone in the room felt their throats tighten. "Wait," Sarah said suddenly, her mind clearly racing. "If someone stole him and removed his chip, why was he found as a stray on a highway 70 miles away? Why not just sell him or keep him?" Officer Chen met her eyes and she could see he was thinking the same dark thought. Because Duke wouldn't cooperate. German Shepherds are loyal dogs. They bond deeply. If someone was trying to train him for illegal purposes, fighting, guarding illegal operations, or resale, and he wouldn't comply, they might have just dumped him far from where they took him. "Or he escaped," Dr. Martinez added. "If Emma's memories, or whatever she's intuiting, are accurate and there were multiple dogs in cages, we could be looking at a puppy mill, a dog theft ring, or something worse. Duke might have gotten out." Sarah's hands were shaking as she pulled out her phone again. "I need to call Miguel. He needs to know we found him. He needs to know Duke is alive." But Officer Chen's phone was already buzzing insistently. He glanced at the screen and his face went pale. It was his captain. He'd missed 4 calls during the examination. "I have to take this," he said, stepping out of the room. Through the door they could hear his muffled voice. "Yes, sir. I know I missed the demonstration, sir. Something's happened. Something big." When he returned 2 minutes later, his expression was unreadable. "That was my captain. Someone at the demonstration posted the video on social media. It's already gone viral, over 2 million views in the last hour. The media is calling the station. They want the story." Sarah's eyes widened. "Viral? What does that mean for?" "It means everyone is going to know about this," Chen interrupted quietly. "It means we need to make decisions, fast." Video was everywhere. By that evening, every major news network had picked up the story. "Miracle reunion or heartbreaking custody battle." The headlines screamed across television screens, news websites, and social media platforms. The footage from the gymnasium had been shared millions of times. Emma's tear-streaked face pointing at Duke, the dog breaking free from Officer Chen's control, the heart-shaped marking revealed under the vest. Sarah sat on her living room couch, her husband Miguel beside her, watching their story unfold on the 6 o'clock news. Emma was in her bedroom, having finally fallen asleep after an emotionally exhausting day. On the coffee table sat a stack of documents, Duke's original adoption papers from when he was a puppy, veterinary records spanning 3 years, registration papers, even photos time-stamped and dated proving their ownership. The doorbell had been ringing constantly. Reporters camped outside their modest 2-story home in Riverside, satellite trucks lining the quiet suburban street. Neighbors they'd barely spoken to in years suddenly wanted to offer support, advice, casseroles. Sarah's phone hadn't stopped buzzing with messages, calls, interview requests. "They're calling me a heartless mother," Sarah said quietly, scrolling through comments on one of the news articles. Her voice was hollow, drained. "People are saying I should let it go, that Duke has a more important job now, that I'm being selfish." Miguel wrapped his arm around her shoulders. "Don't read those, Amber. People don't understand. They weren't here when Emma cried every night for 2 months. They didn't see how broken she was." But other comments were equally vicious toward Officer Chen. "He stole someone's dog," one read. "That cop should give Duke back immediately. He belongs to that little girl." The internet had chosen sides and the divide was brutal. Across town, Officer Marcus Chen sat in his small apartment, Duke lying at his feet as he always did. The German shepherd seemed subdued, sensing his handler's distress. Chen had a beer in his hand, untouched, growing warm. His phone sat face down on the table. He couldn't look at it anymore. His captain had called 3 times, the department's legal team twice, the media liaison 4 times. Everyone wanted to know the same thing. What was he going to do? Chen looked down at Duke, and his heart splintered into smaller pieces. 2 years. They'd been partners for 2 years. They tracked down a missing 6-year-old boy lost in the woods, saved his life. They'd found evidence that put away a drug dealer who'd terrorized a neighborhood for years. They'd comforted victims, scared away criminals, kept people safe. Duke wasn't just his work partner. He was Chen's family. After his divorce 3 years ago, coming home to an empty apartment had nearly broken him. Duke had filled that emptiness. Duke was the reason Chen got up in the morning, the reason he laughed, the reason he felt like life had purpose beyond just existing. And now he was supposed to just give that up. "It's not fair," Chen whispered to the dog. Duke's ears perked up at his voice. "You love me too, don't you, boy? This is your home now. I'm your person now." But even as he said it, he couldn't forget the image of Emma's face. The pure, unfiltered joy when Duke had run to her. The way Duke had transformed, losing every ounce of his professional composure to become a wiggling, whining puppy desperate for the little girl's attention. Duke had never acted that way with him, not once. The next morning, Sarah received a phone call from a lawyer named Janet Price. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I'm with the Animal Legal Defense Fund. I saw your story on the news. I'd like to offer you pro bono representation." "Representation," Sarah repeated, her stomach sinking. "You mean this is going to be a legal battle?" "I'm afraid it might be," Janet said gently. "The Columbus Police Department has a vested interest in keeping Duke. He's a certified K-9 officer, expensive to train, valuable to the community. They may argue that Duke's role saving lives supersedes your ownership claim, or that the time elapsed constitutes abandonment." "Abandonment," Sarah's voice rose sharply. "We never stopped looking for him. We have proof." "I know," Janet interrupted calmly. "And that's why I want to help. You have documentation proving ownership, proof of microchipping, evidence of theft. Legally, Duke is your property. But this isn't just about law, it's about public opinion, politics, and what a judge might consider the greater good." Miguel took the phone from Sarah's shaking hands. "What are our chances?" There was a long pause. "Honestly, 50-50, maybe 60-40 in your favor. But even if you win legally, you need to consider what this fight will cost emotionally. For Emma, for you, for everyone involved." That same morning, Officer Chen met with his captain and the department's legal team in a sterile conference room at police headquarters. Captain Rodriguez, no relation to Sarah, was a stern woman in her 50s with gray streaks in her dark hair. "Chen, we need to discuss your options," she began without preamble. "The department has consulted with our attorneys. Legally, the Rodriguez family has a strong claim. They have documentation proving prior ownership. They never formally surrendered the dog. The theft and microchip removal strengthened their case." Chen felt his world crumbling. "So that's it, we just give up." "I didn't say that," the captain continued. "We could fight it. Argue that Duke is now a certified police dog, that his training represents a significant taxpayer investment, that his work serves the public good. We could make the case that returning him to a private family would deprive the community of a valuable resource." "Could we win?" Chen asked, though the words tasted like ash in his mouth. The department's attorney, a sharp-eyed man named David Park, spoke up. "Possibly, but it would be ugly, very ugly. The optics of a police department fighting a family, especially a family that had their dog stolen, would be terrible. The media would crucify us. And even if we won," he hesitated, "there's the question of whether Duke would ever be the same, knowing he'd been torn away from that little girl again." Chen slumped in his chair. "What if Duke chooses?" Everyone looked at him. "What if we let Duke decide?" Chen elaborated, his voice gaining strength even as his heart broke. "Bring both families together, see who he goes to. If he chooses me, they accept it. If he chooses them—" He couldn't finish the sentence. Captain Rodriguez shook her head. "Chen, that's not how the law works. We can't base custody on a dog's behavior. It sets a terrible precedent, and frankly, it's not fair to anyone, least of all Duke." But the story had already been leaked to the press. By noon, the Let Duke Choose movement had gained traction online. Thousands of comments flooded in demanding that Duke be allowed to decide his own fate. Petitions circulated. People took sides. At the Rodriguez home, Emma wasn't eating. She decorated her room with new drawings, pictures of her and Duke, crayon masterpieces showing them playing in the yard, sleeping together, going for walks. She'd pulled out Duke's old collar from the box in her closet and wore it around her wrist like a bracelet. "When is Duke coming home?" she asked for the 100th time. Sarah didn't have an answer. She'd cried so much in the past 48 hours that she had no tears left. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Duke's face. Her Duke. Their Duke. The puppy they'd raised, the dog who'd protected her baby, the beloved family member who'd been stolen from them. But she also saw Officer Chen's face at the veterinary clinic. The devastation. The love. Two families, one dog, an impossible choice. The phone rang again. It was Janet Price. "Sarah, the police department has requested a mediation meeting. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. at the municipal building. You, your family, Officer Chen, and a neutral mediator. No cameras, no press. Just everyone in one room trying to find a solution. Sarah looked at Miguel, who nodded slowly. We'll be there, she said. That night across town, Officer Chen couldn't sleep. Duke lay beside his bed, as always, his breathing steady and calm. Chen reached down and stroked the dog's head. I love you, buddy, he whispered into the darkness. No matter what happens tomorrow, I want you to know that. Duke's tail thumped once against the floor. And in a house 40 miles away, Emma Rodriguez whispered into her stuffed rabbit. Tomorrow, Duke comes home. I just know it. But morning would bring not resolution, but a decision that would change all their lives forever. The mediation room at the Columbus Municipal Building was deliberately neutral, beige walls, a long conference table, uncomfortable chairs that discouraged lingering. Outside, despite the private meeting designation, news vans lined the street. Reporters waited like vultures, ready to broadcast whatever decision emerged from that room. Inside, silence hung heavy as death. Sarah and Miguel sat on one side of the table, their lawyer Janet beside them. Emma was there too, though Janet had advised against it. She's too young, the lawyer had said, but Sarah had been firm. This is about her. She deserves to be here. Across the table sat Officer Marcus Chen, alone except for Captain Rodriguez and the department's attorney. Chen looked like he hadn't slept in days. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. His uniform, normally immaculate, was slightly wrinkled. Duke lay in the middle of the room, equidistant from both families. His head swiveled back and forth between Emma and Chen, his ears drooping with confusion. He could sense the tension, the grief radiating from everyone in the room. The mediator, a woman named Dr. Sharon Ellis, cleared her throat. Thank you all for coming. I know this is incredibly difficult. Before we begin formal negotiations, I'd like to give each party a chance to speak from the heart. Mrs. Rodriguez, would you like to start? Sarah's hands trembled as she opened a folder. Inside were photos: Duke as a puppy, Duke with baby Emma, Duke on their family Christmas card. Her voice cracked as she spoke. Duke was our first baby, she began. Before Emma was even born, he was our family. Miguel and I used to joke that we were practicing being parents with him. A sad smile crossed her face. When Emma came home from the hospital, Duke appointed himself her guardian. He slept under her crib every night. When she learned to crawl, he crawled with her. When she took her first steps, she held onto his collar for balance. Emma nodded solemnly from her seat, her small hands folded in her lap. When Duke disappeared, it nearly destroyed us, Sarah continued, her voice strengthening with emotion. We spent every dollar we had searching for him. I quit my job to look full-time. We drove thousands of miles, checked hundreds of shelters, printed thousands of flyers. Emma had nightmares for months. She stopped smiling. She stopped playing. Our happy, bright little girl became a shadow of herself. Sarah's eyes met Officer Chen's across the table. I don't blame you. You didn't know. You gave Duke a home when he needed one. You trained him, loved him, kept him safe. And I'm grateful for that, truly I am. She took a shuddering breath. But he's ours. He was stolen from us. We never stopped being his family, and we never will. We want him home. The room was silent except for the sound of Sarah's quiet crying. Miguel squeezed her hand. Dr. Ellis turned to Officer Chen. Officer, would you like to respond? Chen stared at his hands for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough with suppressed emotion. 2 years ago, I was in a dark place. My marriage had fallen apart. I was living alone in an empty apartment, wondering what the point of any of it was. He looked at Duke and his eyes glistened. Then I met this dog at the rescue. He was scared, broken, didn't trust anyone. And I thought, here's someone who understands. He wiped his eyes roughly with the back of his hand. We helped each other heal. Duke became my partner, my family, my reason to keep going. Together, we've done things I'm proud of. We found missing children. We kept communities safe. We made a difference. Chen's voice broke. I love him. I know that doesn't give me legal rights, but I love him like he's mine. going home to an empty apartment again. I don't know if I can do that." Emma had been quiet throughout both speeches, her young face serious beyond her years. Now she slipped from her chair and walked to the middle of the room. She sat down next to Duke, wrapping her arms around his neck. "Duke," she whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear, "you're a hero now. Officer Chen says you save people. That's really, really important." Duke licked her cheek gently. Emma looked up at her mother, tears streaming down her face. "Mommy, remember what you told me about how sometimes loving someone means wanting them to be happy, even if it makes us sad." Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. She had said that months ago, when they'd finally accepted Duke was gone, when they'd been trying to explain to Emma why they couldn't search forever. The little girl turned to Officer Chen. "Do you promise to take care of Duke, forever and ever?" Chen couldn't speak. He could only nod, tears now flowing freely down his face. Emma nodded back as if making a decision. Then she turned to her mother. "Mommy, I think Duke needs to stay with Officer Chen, because other little kids need him to find them when they're lost. That's more important than me, right?" "No, baby," Sarah started, but Emma interrupted. "But I don't want to say goodbye forever," Emma continued, her voice small and scared. "Can I still see him sometimes? Can he still be my friend?" Officer Chen stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. He crossed the room and knelt beside Emma and Duke. When he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion but firm with conviction. "Emma, how about this? Duke stays a police officer, but he becomes our partner, yours and mine together. You can visit him whenever you want. You can come to demonstrations with us. You can help train him. And Duke," he looked at the German shepherd, "will be the special K-9 officer who watches over your neighborhood, your school, your family. He'll protect you, just like he always did." Sarah stood too, moving to join them. "But Emma, you don't have to decide this. Duke is ours. We have every right." "I know, Mommy," Emma said, her wisdom far beyond her 3 years. "But Duke has a big job now. He's a hero. And heroes help everybody, not just one family." Officer Chen looked at Sarah, his expression raw and vulnerable. "What if we share him? Legally, he remains Columbus PD property, but you're listed as his family of record. Emma becomes his official junior handler. She can participate in appropriate public events, visit the station, be part of his life. And I promise, Duke will always know he belongs to her too." Sarah looked at her husband. Miguel had tears in his eyes, but he nodded slowly. "And holidays," Sarah said suddenly. "Christmas, Thanksgiving, Emma's birthday. Duke comes home for those, and summer, 2 weeks every summer, he's ours." Chen didn't hesitate. "Yes, absolutely yes." Dr. Ellis was already drafting the agreement, her own eyes suspiciously bright. 3 weeks later, Emma stood proudly at Jefferson Elementary's gymnasium, the same place where everything had changed. She wore a special vest that read Junior K-9 Handler and held Duke's leash with both hands. Beside her, Officer Chen addressed the crowd. "This is Emma," he announced, his hand resting gently on the little girl's shoulder. "She's Duke's best friend and his original family. She's going to help me show you how amazing police dogs are." Emma beamed as Duke performed perfectly, responding to her commands with the same precision he showed Officer Chen. The crowd erupted in applause. In the back row, Sarah and Miguel watched their daughter shine, their hearts simultaneously breaking and soaring. After the demonstration, families crowded around to meet Duke and Emma. The little girl answered questions with confidence. "Yes, he's my dog, but he has to help everybody, not just me. That's what heroes do." That night, Officer Chen drove Emma and Duke back to the Rodriguez home. It was Friday, their standing dinner night. Sarah had made pot roast, Duke's favorite. As Emma hugged Duke goodbye in the driveway, whispering secrets into his fur, Chen and Sarah stood together watching. "Thank you," Chen said quietly. "Thank you," Sarah replied, "for giving him purpose, for keeping him safe, for sharing him with us." Emma skipped back to the car, waving as they pulled away. Duke's head hung out the window, his ears flapping in the breeze, his tongue lolling in a doggy grin. Inside, Emma went to her room, the one decorated with pictures of Duke. But these new pictures were different. They showed Duke in his police vest, Duke with Officer Chen, Duke receiving a community service award. And in the center, a large photo from the gymnasium demonstration. Emma and Duke together again, both of them beaming. She'd titled it in her childish handwriting, "My Hero." Because sometimes love doesn't mean holding on tight. Sometimes love means letting go, trusting that the bond you share is strong enough to withstand any distance. Sometimes love multiplies instead of dividing, creating something more beautiful than possession ever could. Duke had found his way home, not to a single house but to two families who loved him, not to one purpose but to many. He was a police dog. He was a hero. He was Emma's best friend. And in the end, he was exactly where he needed to be. The end.